transportation for the KC Levees projects updates.
Okay, so that is our blue sheet update is no item 3.
Yeah, Commissioner Bynum, this is Melissa Sieben. Due to our furlough situation, we were not able to have Sarah White available to present tonight.
Okay, that is not a problem. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I didn't see that. So that is one revision to tonight's agenda, eliminating item 3. And with that, we have 2 remaining agenda items. The first of which is a grant, community-based crime reduction. And we have Deputy Chief Steve Hallmark as well as Deputy Administrator Alan House here, if I'm not mistaken. Which of you 2 gentlemen would like to present this?
Evening, Commissioner. This is Alan Howes, and I'll go ahead and start it off and then hand it over to Assistant Chief Hallmark. Also joined by the Director of the Health Department, Julianne Van Loo, who was part of this grant submission. As the information in the agenda noted, that the Police Department, in conjunction with the Health Department, has submitted for this federal grant that is really focused on community-based crime reduction and specifically around reducing gun violence in the community. Also, we'll note that the grant submission deadline for this, we sort of came upon it, the police department and others worked on it. The due date was June 11th, and we didn't realize the opportunity until prior to or after the previous meeting of the standing committee. So we bring it to you having already submitted for it and request your approval for acceptance should we be so fortunate as to get the grant. This grant is for 3 years and up to $1 million. It's also 100% federal. There is no local match on this grant. It does, however, and I'll note this right up front, it does come as other federal grants with conditions related to cooperation with federal officials. And the Commission recently heard more about the Safe and Welcoming Ordinance. And had that ordinance been in effect, it would have come into conflict with the conditions, the federal conditions requested of the grant. However, under current guidance within the UG, that conflict did not exist, and so those that cooperation was included as part of the grant application. Having said all that, like I said, the focus of the grant was reducing violent crime in the community, and it has really 4 main components: enforcement, technology, community partnerships, and taking a public health approach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Chief Steve Hallmark to talk about enforcement and technology as part of this grant application.
Good evening. I'm Steve Hallmark for the Police Department. As Alan stated, we are seeking approval to accept a federal award through the fiscal year 20 BJA Innovations in Community-Based Crime Reduction Grant Program. This program is designed to assist law enforcement agencies in reducing serious and violent crime by building trust and developing support within specific communities where crime is heavily concentrated. As you are all aware, there are 6 census tracts in KCK which have been designated as opportunity zones. The area that we will designate for this endeavor includes the Police Department's previously established DDAC zone, as well as 2 adjoining opportunity zones. We will target these neighborhoods with a 4-pronged approach, which are enhanced enforcement through hotspot policing, technology, which includes the addition of more traffic cameras, epidemiology, in which we will work with the Health Department to help identify characteristics of individuals and communities perpetrating and falling victim to violence, and community engagement by expanding upon the relationships we have with several of our current community partner organizations. Our federal request will be just under $1 million and includes funding for personnel, equipment, and software to support the endeavors. The project period will last for 3 years, and again, as Alan had stated, there is no match requirement for the UG.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll turn it over to Julianne Van Loo, Director of the Health Department, to talk a little bit about what the public health approach is in this context.
Thanks, Alan. Just a couple words on that. The field of public health in the last decade has really started to have kind of a subset within epidemiology that's devoted to the epidemiology of violence prevention. And so we're really excited from a health department standpoint to get to participate in this by hiring an epidemiologist specific to violence prevention to conduct work like social network analyses to understand who's perpetrating this in our community, what the risk and protective factors are. You know, like infectious disease, crime, and gun violence specifically is impacted by exposure, including frequency and duration. And so using those public health principles to better understand the spread of violence in our community, we think could really add a lot to what the police department is already doing into this newer kind of community-based approach. So we're excited to partner and kind of bring a new angle to this work.
Thank you very much. If I could just get a notion, Deputy Chief Hallmark, you had mentioned briefly what the dollars would purchase. Could you tell us that again? And then between you and Ms. Van Loo, maybe you could extrapolate what all you see spending the money on over a 3-year time period. So in other words, you know, X number of widgets would be in use by the police department, but then the health department would use a different set of items or software, or as you stated, Julianne, a person. So could you just give me that one more time?
I could, ma'am, but I think Alan might be better suited to do that. He did the mock-up on the budget narrative, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And it's I think roughly a third of it goes to technology, and that's cameras predominantly to expand and the camera network. So under the previous TIPS federal grant, the KPD has started to implement a camera network, and recently also working closely with other regional partners as part of a strategy to address crime in the community. And this would add several $100,000 for the purchase of additional cameras. Those are also connected into largely, in most cases, to the fiber network that has been put into place that supports the PD operations as well. So that's a piece of it. There's another portion of it, which is personnel, and that includes everything from police overtime costs to, as mentioned, hiring an epidemiologist, hiring a program coordinator, and a crime analyst as part of the grant. And then there's funds also allocated for community partnership, and specifically for the Police Athletic League to serve as a convening agent in support of the grant and bringing different community partners together. So I think those are the main components of the budget as it was developed.
Thank you. Does any other member of our committee have a question on this item? And Ms. Bridget Cobbins, were there any comments received from the public?
No comments from the public.
Commissioner Mike Kane, move for approval.
Thank you.
Markley, second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Kane and a second from Commissioner Markley. Any other comments or questions? Could I have roll call on the motion?
Roll call: Groneman,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. And that motion carries. Thank you all very much for that.
Commissioner Bynum, if I may, and I should have mentioned this at the onset as well, there's, in addition, we wanted to bring back to you real quick, there were some requests for a timeline on body cameras specifically since we last met. And so while we were discussing the police grant, we asked Deputy Chief Quinn to kind of just flash up on the screen here a timeline for body cameras at the request of the committee. We didn't add it as a separate item, but I bundled it together with this item, if that's okay.
Thank you. That'd be great. Deputy Chief Quinn.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll go ahead and I'll be brief as I can here.
hope not to let Rocky down on sharing my screen here, so bear with me just a second. Hopefully everybody can see the body-worn camera slide that I have on the screen there.
I cannot yet.
I cannot either.
Okay.
If you're having issues, I can go ahead and put it up and you can talk me through it. Oh, there you go. You have it.
All right. Live and learn here. All right. All right. Hopefully you have the full slide, not the presenter view there.
Correct.
All right. So real quick, the goal of this project is to outfit marked patrol units, police officers, and animal service officers of the KPD with body-worn cameras and in-car cameras to update our aging fleet of in-car cameras that we have now that are approaching anywhere from 15 to 20 years old, depending on the cameras that we're talking about. And it would record any enforcement contact that our citizens have, or our police officers have with the citizens of our community. Why are we doing this? To improve officer safety, to enhance public trust, strengthen evidence of crime scenes and investigations, to increase officer and citizen accountability, improve officer training, and reduce liability. So here's the timeline to kind of update where we are in this process here. Our contract is to be completed by the end of the month, meaning July. They're working on it now, sending statement of work back and forth between our vendor and our legal team. And during that same time frame, we're going to finalize our press release. It'll be like a push out to the community to tell them where we're going with body-worn cameras. And then in the month of August, once our vendor has been told that the contract is signed, they're telling us it'll take 4 weeks in order for the equipment to arrive to us. And during that same time frame, we're going to finalize our officer training, figure out which direction we're going to go with that. And we're going to spin up our courts, municipal court and district court, on how we're going to send them the evidence that they would need in order to utilize the system to its capabilities. And then in September, when we receive the equipment, we're going to begin rolling that out one station at a time. And the reason we've chosen that approach is that this is a pretty big venture that we're moving on to here, and to spin up our Midtown patrol station would be the ones who utilize these same cameras for our pilot program. And so they would be the easiest ones to get up and running. And we're anticipating a 2 to 3 week process while we're doing that. And if it goes well, then we can incorporate our specialized units during that 2 to 3 week time frame before we roll out to the next station. And all we have 4 stations that we would push these out to. It'd be Midtown Patrol, East Patrol, South Patrol, and West Patrol, not necessarily in that order. And so we would hope to have that process starting in September. I'm looking at 2 to 3 weeks per station. You're looking at 12 to 15 weeks, give or take, to get them out to all of the officers. So program challenges here, IT staff to facilitate the system. We received approval to hire 2 people beginning in July of 21, or 1 beginning in January of 21. We chose that latter option. We would like to have the person up and running in January, so that way they're familiar with the program. This is an IT related person to help infrastructure, keep the equipment up and running, to make sure we don't have any problems, those sort of things. Some other challenges that we are going to have to deal with at some point is Kansas Open Records Act and for subpoenas and opens records request. Right now, we got a handful of cameras that keeps our 1 person that we have busy on a regular basis. However, once we go live with 300 cameras and over 100 in-car cameras, the number of videos are going to be, approaching 300,000 to 500,000 per year. And so you expect numerous open records requests and subpoena requests for those videos. And so we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do that, because currently we don't have the personnel to do that. And then an auditing function. Best practice across the country, we've noticed lately, is that you have to have somebody who audits the program. And the audit person here that I'm referring to is not to review the video, this person's task all day long, 8 hours a day, every single day, is to simply pair up a call for service to the actual car video or body worn camera video. And all they do is make sure that the camera was turned on, make sure it wasn't turned off, prematurely. What they have found is that if there is a significant incident that occurs and the camera was not turned on the way it should have been, the officer just forgot, got sidetracked, something like that, that the officer loses credibility by not having the camera on. Jurors are now finding that the body worn camera footage is more credible than the actual police officer testimony. And so there is a huge negative impact when it is found that there are officers out there who are not turning the cameras on. And so they are now instituting auditing people across the country who simply sit there, match up calls for service to the camera footage to make sure that the officers are doing that, turning them on and off all day, every day. And to clarify, these positions are all different positions. IT support is for the equipment part of it. Cora subpoena request is another piece of that. And then the auditing function is also a third piece that currently we don't have the personnel for. So at some point, as we move forward into this project, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to approach those. And with that, I'll stop sharing this. And if there are any questions, I can help out.
Are there any questions from the committee? And so, Deputy Chief, it sounds like you're confident then in full rollout by the end of 2020.
Yes, ma'am. The only thing that's kind of holding up right now is that the vendor and the UG legal team has to work out some final details. Once that happens, it's just a matter of shipping the equipment to us.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a comment or question on our body worn camera program for the KCK Police Department? If not, we'll thank you very much again. And I believe that completes that item. And we can move to the second and last item on our agenda for Public Works and Safety tonight. And that is the naming of a 6-mile tributary after Chief Nikon Hikon. And we have Deputy Chief Counsel, Misty Brown, available here to give us some presentation and background information on this request. Misty, are you there?
I am here, Commissioner. Thank you. I would like to go ahead and recognize Nathan Cho. He's our legal department intern who worked up this item. And we also have Brad Harrington, who's the vice president of the Bonner Springs Historical Society, the Historical Preservation Society, that I believe started this request. So we have this resolution of support, and I will turn it over to Nathan and Brad to give their presentation.
I'll let Brad speak because he's the one who prepared the original application to the Board of Geographic Names. But basically, the Board of Geographic Names is in charge of making sure that we have a uniform naming system throughout the country. And they received their application from Brad, and they have solicited our feedback alongside Leavenworth County to make sure that there's local support for the name change. But Brad, if you'd like to discuss the application, I have the PowerPoint open up, and I'm happy to move slides as you need.
All right, thank you, and thank you for having me here this evening. It's been proposed that this name be recognized as the actual given name of this creek. Captain Nikon Hikon is buried near the headwaters of this creek, and I actually found the actual name on a 1870s map. It's also here in our PowerPoint. It's an 1870s map of Wyandotte County, and if you zoom in there, you can see it said Nikon Hikon Creek, and he is buried in that area where the old Indian cemetery and broom factory is there on the map. And that is now in the Delaware Ridge housing development. And so we would like this creek to be recognized as its actual given name of Nikon Hikon Creek. Then also Bonner Springs, the city of Bonner is going to be speaking about this evening at their city council for to give their recommendation and consent. And we've also reached out to the Delaware Tribe of Indians and to Leavenworth County as well to get everyone's support. And as so far, it seems as though everyone is in much support of this. And also one other thing, the Captain Nikon Hekon was one of the chiefs of the Wolf Band of the Delaware Tribe of Indians. And this creek, as you can see there highlighted in blue, flows then into the Wolf Creek that's here just outside of Bonner Springs. And of course, that then flows into the Kaw River. Any questions?
I think,
Commissioners,
yes.
I was just going to say, as Commissioner Bynum knows from our little pre-agenda meeting, I'm actually the commissioner who saw this email come through and just said, well, I don't see why not. So sounded like a good idea to me. So I asked staff to look into what it would take to assist Brad in his request. And still hearing his presentation, I guess my response is still, I don't see why not. It seems like a nice idea to me. So hopefully there are others who have similar thoughts.
I agree. I also like the idea, and I appreciate Commissioner Markley for recognizing it and you know, asking that we look into it and make sure it's something that we can do. And I would ask, what's the step once you have Leavenworth County? Are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
After Leavenworth County, Bonner Springs, and Unified Government, what seals the deal after the local municipalities and counties say yes?
Nathan, do you want to speak on that? Or I can. It's in front of the Board of Geographical Names, and then at their meeting, then they would have to either approve or disapprove the actual naming of the creek. There's different guidelines that they have, and that you can't name it after a living person. And we went through this whole process. I'm not naming it. I'm just getting them to recognize it as its actual given name.
Right.
So it just basically they're wanting to make sure that no town, that no cities or anyone that is in the proximity of this has anything against the recognizing of this name.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? And Clerk Cobbins, have we received anything from the public?
It looks like Bridget is shaking her head no, so I will make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Ramirez.
We have a motion from Commissioner Markley and a second from Commissioner Ramirez for approval. Could we have roll call? If Bridget's having an audio problem, is there someone that could call our roll?
I can go ahead and call it, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Markley,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Aye.
Commissioner Kane,
Aye.
Commissioner Philbrook,
Aye.
Commissioner Bynum,
Aye, and I believe we have,
and Tom Groneman.
Aye.
okay.
Thank you. I'm back on. It kicked me off for a second. Thanks, Rocky. I
Yeah.
have heard all the motions. Thank
All
you.
right. Oh, thank you both so much. Okay, so, and thank you both, gentlemen. I appreciate that presentation. All right, and I do believe that with that, both of the items on our Public Works and Safety agenda are handled, and so we can adjourn this committee meeting, and I will hand this to Commissioner Markley for Administration and Human Services. Thank you.
All right. Before I call this meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, some members of staff and public are attending remotely via Zoom as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is observing knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. Due to COVID-19, the public has been allowed to submit comments by email prior to the meeting, and those comments will be included in the record of the meeting. I will now call this meeting of the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee to order. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Roll call Philbrook,
Here.
Kane,
Here.
Ramirez,
Here.
Bynum,
Here.
Markley.
Here. We do have a new item on our agenda this evening. Item number 5 is a presentation regarding the CARES Act funding. This will be for information only. No action is required, but that is the blue sheet item for this committee meeting. Our first order of business is the minutes from our April 27th meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Move for approval, Commissioner Philbrook.
Second, Bynum.
There's a motion and second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Philbrook, Philbrook,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye. Our first committee agenda item of 5 items now is a renaming of the Urban Planning and Land Use Department. Most people probably didn't even know that was the official name, but Gunnar Hand is here with us, our director of that department, to present this item. Mr. Hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is Gunnar Hand with Director of Urban Planning, hopefully to be changed to Planning and Urban Design. This is actually an item for information only. We briefed some of you on this moving forward, and I think it's just, the intent is to sort of reflect the core mission of the department. Can everybody hear me? Okay, yeah, sorry. I think it is just in general, I think that there's a transition happening across the planning profession. It's reflected in our zoning code update as well, which will be heavily, which will be not a sea change, but certainly a large transition in how we view the entitlement process. You may have recalled in some of our master planning efforts over the last few years, we've had an increasing amount of design guidelines in those. Planning is just inherently becoming more three-dimensional, which I think is characteristic of the urban design name change specifically. I would also point out that, at least in my opinion, urban planning and land use is redundant. It's the same thing. I would also point out that urban planning has a very specific urban tone to it, and we do planning across in the planning community what we call all sorts of different transsector typologies. It is both downtown Kansas City, Kansas. It is west of 435. It is interurban. It is suburban, rural, agricultural. And so I think that it's more reflective of both the character of our county as well as the work that we are doing and increasingly doing at the planning department. So with that, we are, it's not going to be like a major, massive rollout. I think it's one of those things where we'll just do progressively. It doesn't cost us any money. We're right at the budget conversations where we can rename them internally. As we move forward, it'll be a simple sort of shift in some of our staff reports. Honestly, the last thing that will probably happen will be the renaming on our zoning enforcement card, because that's the one thing that's going to cost us a little money.
So say again, Gunnar, what is the new name going to be?
The proposal is to rename it the Planning and Urban Design Department.
Commissioners, questions about this idea? As I said, I think in agenda review, I think our comment was everybody just calls it the planning department anyway, so changing it to planning seems to be a step in the right direction.
Commissioner Markley, it's Melissa Bynum.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I know you had, Mr. Hand, you had commented on removal of the name urban out of the current name, and yet you leave it in the proposed new name. And I was just curious why.
Urban design is the understood term for sort of the application of design guidelines across the built environment. Urban in the sense that there's buildings, not urban planning in the sense that that's an urban context. If that makes, it's somewhat esoteric. I can understand that. But planning, we believe, at least in this sort of shift, that planning is more encompassing of the true work that we do across, again, multiple transects or building typologies. The theory and sort of practice of urban design is the three-dimensional application of those typically plan view conversations that we have in the planning profession.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Philbrook. So does this mean then when you use the terminology urban design that it ends up being a little bit more flexible across the city versus pinpointing everything? What are you thinking?
My thinking is, it kind of goes back to something just not to repeat myself, but I think urban design is more reflective of the three-dimensional nature of the profession. I think that we are increasingly looking at things like height, bulk, setbacks, which are historically viewed in a plan view. But what we're trying to build is a certain type of character across different typologies. So urban design is a general concept that thinks towards, in an urban environment, like in downtown Kansas City, Kansas, what is the three-dimensional character of that community versus if I go out into the other extreme, into a more agricultural rural neighborhood, whether that's Turner or Piper or wherever, what is the urban design character of that built environment? Urban in the sense that it is a human built environment, not natural environment.
So along the Leavenworth Road corridor as to different pockets of personnel of those neighborhoods, and those would be design areas, certain types of design in different areas.
You cut off a little bit in your question, Commissioner.
For instance, Leavenworth Road. So Leavenworth Road has a bunch of different personalities along that road. And there's communities along that road, and you know, they like to reflect some of their background and how they feel about what's happening there. So when you talk about design and you're talking three-dimensional, are we talking about ways to look at those different little pockets along Leavenworth Road as design entities?
Yes, we're thinking about protecting and enhancing those characters that make us unique.
Okay.
As opposed to applying a single ideology or design type across the entire county.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners about this item? Now I show that we are to take action on this item, but Gunnar, I think you said it's more for information only. Do you want us to take action to demonstrate our approval of your new title?
If you so choose, that'd be great.
Commissioner Philbrook, move to approve this and move it toward the commission.
Ramirez, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Bridget, I forgot to ask if there were any comments received from the public. I'm guessing there were not, but if you have any, you can let us know before we do roll call. I think Bridget might have disappeared. Rocky, are you able to assist in roll call?
Absolutely. All right. All right. Bynum.
Here she is.
Aye.
Roll call, Philbrook.
Okay.
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Hand.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your new name. All right, item number 2 is an update on Parks and Rec software. And I think that somewhere Angel is on here with us and Alan Howes is on here with us to discuss this item. Oh, yes, there I see her. Angel Obert, welcome.
Are you able to see me at all? Hello?
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. Well, it's all right. We can go with that. A lot of this is just going to be a shared screen anyway, so. All right, so thank you for having me, commissioners. I am going to just give a short presentation over our Civic Rec software. 1 second.
While this is Alan Howes, while Angel is bringing that up, I'll just give you kind of the quick background on this item as well, which is, you'll see the demonstration of the software. This project began several years ago as a partnership between the Knowledge Department and Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec was looking for ways to enhance the customer experience for residents, and recognized that their previous software left things to be desired in that regard. And so they started working with a project manager in the Knowledge Department. They looked at, should they upgrade their old system? Should they look at what else is in the marketplace? And ultimately, after a lot of research, a lot of demos with different vendors, ultimately decided to move forward with the replacement system. And that's what you'll see here this evening. And it was really a fun project for the team to be part of and to work with the Parks and Recreation Department, and really kind of, I think, demonstrates the role that the Knowledge Department project managers seek to play, which is as a kind of a consultative role with departments on technology related projects from kind of start to finish. And really the goal is to ensure that the UG is getting the maximum benefits from investments that are being made in employee technology, employee productivity and customer service through technology. And I think this is a good example of that. So I'll turn it back over to Angel now.
Thank you, Alan. Is everybody able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
And again, a huge thank you to Alan's team. They've been monumental in moving this project forward and allowing us to get to this day. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about what Civic Rec is. So this picture on the first slide here is actually our front page. That's what a consumer would see when they go to the public facing page. So Civic Rec is a new digital platform providing residents with easier access to activities, classes, sports, and youth leagues. The biggest thing about Civic Rec is it allows for convenient online registration and payment options. It's accessible via computers, tablets, and smartphones. Something that really attracted us to Civic Rec is that it's right in our backyard. The headquarters is in Manhattan, Kansas. With our previous rec management software, the headquarters was out of Vermont, and that made client support and troubleshooting pretty challenging, just with turnaround times and different things like that. So we've been really impressed so far with the client support that we've had from Civic Rec, and we are excited about that as we move forward. So Civic Rec will roll out in 2 phases. So currently, right now, the public has access to reserving shelters, halls, and community centers online. And then phase 2 will be about mid-August. They'll be able to register for sports leagues, youth and adult, our community center programs, and also special events. So we're excited about that and working towards that phase 2 rollout in mid-August. I'm going to show a quick marketing video that we'll begin using to bring awareness to the public about this new feature.
Have you heard the news? The Wyandotte County Parks and Recreation Department has a new software built specifically with you and your family in mind. You can now rent park shelters completely online, plus check availability of banquet hall, Coming soon, you will be able to register for league sports, track account balances, and much more using your computer or mobile device. Create your account now and be the first to know what's coming next.
So we'll start using that video. Follow us on Facebook. I'm sure you'll start seeing a lot of that, and driving the public to go check it out and encourage them to create an account and start doing a lot of our business via the Civic Rec website. The Civic Rec site will be accessible from our UG Parks and Recreation page on wicokck.com. The link below, the wicokck.org/Wico Parks, will take you directly to the Civic Rec site for the public and users on that end. And I'm actually going to turn it over right now to Leslie Reynoso. He's on Alan's IT team, and he's going to do a soft demo and show you what the page looks like and what a user would go through, what steps they would take to create an account and do a soft demo for a shelter reservation.
Thank you, Angel. So when a person comes in, a public user comes into the system, they're going to see this page. Now, over where it says account, I've already logged in, but they would normally see log in or create a new account. And if they already have an account, of course, they could go in. The process, we have a few required fields, but not a lot of information. We're asking for emails, phone numbers, and either an age, like a date of birth, or an age range from folks if they don't want to give us the exact age for that. Then they can register their family. They can put a spouse and children on the same registration. That ties them together. If they happen to go on separately, we can merge them into a family. So we have lots of options there to control how people are represented, how our users are represented in the system. So what I wanted to show you today was just a real brief demo of how they are renting shelters. So they have the ability to choose various areas in here. If you've been to the site at all, you've probably noticed these neighborhood parks. We just kind of wanted to throw those on the front page for now, because a lot of people don't realize that there are parks all over this city that you can just go and use. If no one else has an event there, you can, go and set up a table or some chairs and have an event within reason. And unless it qualifies, of course, for a special event, there are certain rules that allow you not to have large events in those areas, but a family gathering or something would be quite acceptable. But if you were going to rent a shelter, you would just select the shelter, and then you get the park names. And one of the most popular parks is the Lake Park. You also have each of the shelters listed in the cycle. If you, oh, that's lovely. I do not know why I'm not getting the calendar there. If you'll bear with me for a moment, I'm going to punch out and come to an internal account. Which I know will give me those. The view is similar. I can flip to another view and give us a lot more capabilities. Let's see if this is, there we go. So, apologize for that. So what they're going to see is a brief description of the park. They're going to see an address, a physical address. We will be linking to the GIS for the Esri platform, so that they'll be able to actually map to it and find some information about where those are, where the shelters are, etc. They'll then be presented with a calendar. The calendar The green spaces on the calendar are available days. Anything that's blocked out is either passed or unavailable. We do have a 2-day lead time, so you'll notice that the 2 days directly after us are will always be off limits. The weekends are more popular, obviously, for the shelters, but you get a little further out and you can find some time. The system is very configurable, so the end of our season is the 15th of August or October, and excuse me. So we can configure it so that they cannot rent beyond that point. And these are available from the first of the year. So we also have it set where from January 2nd, the first business day of the year, they can rent a shelter all the way through the season from mid-April in most cases to all the way through October. So if I want to rent this particular one, I got to give it a date. So let's say September 13th. We wanted to rent this particular shelter. So we add it to the cart. You'll notice that it brings up the details of that, the cost, and allows you to then go to the checkout. A couple of things that we have available here: park regulations, rules and regulations. They'll be able to view those. Also view a map of the lake. I can pull one of the two up so that you can see what they can render. So we have this one where they can then identify their specific shelter. Then once they're comfortable with the forms, they can then move into an area where we are asking for some additional information and providing some additional information. For example, if they don't closely read the rules and regulations, they may not realize that we don't allow beverages in glass containers. So we kind of bring that to the forefront. And then we also want to get, when they came into the office, we would have them sign a paper saying that they agree to the rules and regulations. This question number 4 does that basic same thing. They have to check and agree to that. And what type of an event do they want to have? This is a required field so that we can track for special events in that case. And right now we're limited to 45 people in a shelter. So we've given the responses. This last one is if they want to give us the time, but it's not a required field. So then it moves on to the payment. And when you get to this point, and this is as far as I'm going to go on this particular demonstration, but if you click the continue to payment button, what you're going to get is the same form that you've probably seen anywhere. If you've ever shopped online, you're going to see it's going to ask you for your name, your address, your credit card information, your billing information, those types of things. The user can then just fill that out. It does identify in a couple of places that there is a convenience fee for using the online system or using a credit card to pay for that. And it identifies that for them, but they fill that out. It then kicks it back and gives them a permit and the ability to print a receipt for the transaction. So they have everything that they need to show ownership of that or rental ownership of that for the day. If the park police happen to come by, or if there's a dispute, somebody says, no, I have it. Somebody's got a permit and a receipt saying that they have in fact rented that facility. So that's, we actually have some updated numbers. I think this was showing 28 out of 62. That was as of this morning. We had additional rentals online. So this is the number of transactions, the number of rental contracts that we put together. Total was 62, which is now 71, and the total of 28, which is now 34. So 34 since Tuesday morning of last week. We have 71 new rental contracts, and of those, 34 were done online with a credit card through this system. Now, we haven't really advertised it much. You've seen the little video presentation, but it's not been released yet to the public. But the Parks and Rec staff are just referring people to that. They get a call, they're in a shelter, they're simply saying, hey, if you want to just look at availability, rent it online, it'll save you a trip to the office. The response has been really staggering, in my opinion, the number of people that have gone online. We even had 5 reservations over the weekend in this count. So it allows people 24/7 access and the ability to kind of self-serve in the parks. And this will continue to expand with league sports and various things as we get into the fall. They'll be able to pay their fees actually and those types of things online. So it will save a lot of the foot traffic that we get here, the lines outside the door in some cases for those popular facilities and destinations. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back over to Angel.
Thank you,
at this
Les.
time.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks for demonstrating that. Yeah, I will just go ahead and finish with saying we've already received some really great feedback from our customers who have called in. They're really excited about being able to get online and have these reservation capabilities located there. And I will say, especially at a time like now, with the pandemic and regulations and restrictions surrounding COVID, and staff having to take some time off work, this has been a really, really nice feature for us to be able to start implementing. And if anybody has any questions or comments.
This is particularly timely, because not having people come to your offices is preferable at this time, but also because I think we're seeing a spike in the number of people who want to have any family gatherings they are having outdoors as a result of the virus. So just great timing on a couple of counts there. Any other commissioners have questions or comments on this item?
Commissioner Markley, this is Commissioner Bynum. I've got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So for my memory says that Davis Hall, for example, is so popular for weddings and parties that people are kind of in line on our first operating day of the calendar year to secure their date for Davis Hall. So that's question number one. How would that work? Or does this system eliminate the calendar year? For example, I could go in there right now and book it for October of 21.
So those are great questions. So I will say in years past, what we've done is the first business day of the year, January 2nd, that's when halls are able to be reserved for that year. So we kind of notified everybody last year. Typically we have a line of people on that January 2nd, anywhere from 50 to 70 people waiting. So what this system will allow them to do is to be able to get online and reserve those shelters as soon as they become available. So that will be eliminating the waiting in line and different things like that on the first business day of the year. Now, to answer your second question about the halls, so Davis Hall is very popular. Our procedures won't change on that. We will still be reserving those halls a year to the date, and the system allows us to set it up to where we can put those restrictions on to where they're only able to, once it rolls over to that date that they're wanting for the following year, they'll be able to reserve it then.
So for Davis Hall or the halls in general, it's basically 1 year out max.
Correct, the year to the date, yes.
And then a couple other comments. It sounds like you've been live for a week and approximately half were taken online, which is great. I do think COVID's playing a part in that, but you had 71 reservations in a week time. So does that seem average to you? That seems like a good, robust quantity to me. And I'm wondering if that's regular. 71 per week.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's probably an average number, and I meant to pull some numbers on that. I know with COVID, shelter reservations have slowed down, people have canceled, but typically, especially being in June or July, a lot of people have had their shelters reserved at, very early on in the year. And with other things not being able to happen or take place, that's probably put a hinder on reservations. But 70 is a pretty good number, I would say, considering the circumstances right now.
Angel, it's Commissioner Bynum for one final comment. I know in the past we've had conversations around Parks and Rec about our usage of our parks, usage of our shelters, usage of our community centers. Do you think that this system is going to, at a minimum, more easily allow you to measure our usage?
I think the system will greatly improve us being able to track the usage and also increase some of that registration. I know what we'd heard a lot in the past is, we're only able to really conduct business from Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 when staff is here. And that made it extremely hard for parents to get here to register their kids for programs and different things like that. But Civic Rec software is amazing as far as reporting capabilities. It's very robust, and this system, we've got a second project we're working on with Alan as well and his team with getting our community centers up and going with intranet and internet. And this specific software is very user friendly. And like I said, the robust reporting capabilities will help us and help staff at those facilities better track usage as far as community members coming in, programs taking place, rosters, and different things like that.
Thank you.
I'll just piggyback on her comments too, that there's also a powerful suite of tools that Parks and Rec staff and management have access to now with the software in terms of matching and assigning people to these assets and to events. And so it should also provide significant benefits to parks in terms of their management of internal operations going forward as well.
So Alan, this is Commissioner Philbrook. I know you remember way back when we were having all of those meetings down at 50th and State, and people coming in about the parks and what they wanted to see happen. And this was one of the biggest things that they were requesting was access to some sort of an internet way to see where are our parks, how many parks do we have, how much does it cost them, and then the programming, all of that. And so, Alan, I know I pestered the heck out of you back then when we were first going through this, and I really appreciate the Parks and Rec and your team being dogged about this and getting this into place.
Thank you. Said it's been a good partnership, and we're excited. Glad to see it rolling out.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there other questions or comments on this item?
Yeah.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Thank you, Commissioner Markley. It's Commissioner Ramirez. I just want to say I am very excited on this. This is an amazing thing. I know that I work for the Johnson County Parks and Rec, and this is how all of our stuff is online. Reservation and all the programming is all online, and it just helps families a lot because they have a lot going on, especially now with Corona. And so this is going to aid them in seeing what's available. I want to thank Angel and Alan, and especially, Emmerich Cross. As you all know, I'm a very big advocate for our Parks and Rec. And so I'm very excited that this is happening, and I can't wait to tell more people about it so that we can get it going and have more numbers come in and see the usage of it. So thank you, and this is very exciting.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation. Something I think we've been looking forward to for a long time. Since there are no further comments or questions, we will move on to item number 3, our CD action plan presented by Wilba Miller. We see the community development budget in this committee, the annual action plan every year. So this is our annual discussion.
Commissioner, can you hear me?
I can, Wilba, welcome.
Yes. Welcome, thank you. As you know, I believe every year I come to the standing committee to bring our proposed current year budget and our revised current year budget and our proposed next year's budget. And while I go through these sheets, there should be a PDF or some Excel spreadsheet that was attached to the RFA. I think Rocky's bringing it up. First, I want to show you this. This is a public notice that went out on June the 11th. You know, we have a 30-day citizen participation requirement that we put this out so that citizens can come and look at it. It'll be in our office and in the clerk's office. And we started at June 12th because I understand that we're going to have our public hearing on the 13th of July and the adoption of the budget on the 16th of July. While we go through this budget tonight, if there's any changes, we still can change it, even though this is being reviewed by the city. Just kind of wanted to start out with that. And as you see, for our 2020 funding, it is CDBG or community development, $2,304,000. Home is $876,000, and the emergency solutions grant for the homeless is about $189,000 or $198,000. So that has been published in all of the local newspapers and the Echo, and it's been on Nextdoor, and I believe it's been on Livable Neighborhoods and other websites. So this first page is the community development block grant. The 2020 column shows and reflects the budget that you adopted last year, plus any leftover funds, what we call reappropriated funds, so that we can continue to spend. You know, our funds don't go away. We just keep spending until we've used them up. And then, of course, the 2021 budget will be what our allocation is this year. It doesn't get approved by HUD until sometime after August. We go through our environmental process, and then it'll be available next year. So if you'd like, I will walk down the page and give you some notes as we go. CD program administration is staff costs along with our fair housing costs. As you can see, 2020 has a little more because we had leftovers from last year so that we could bring it forward. CD rehab and operating expense is also staff costs. It's our inspectors, our environmental person. It's $535,000. It had a little leftover from last year that we brought forward. The emergency home repair is the program that we do for low and moderate income homeowners. We do furnaces, electrical, barrier removal, plumbing, sewers. I believe we adopted a budget of $400,000 last year, so we did have 38 left over from last year's expenditure. So it really is a higher budget than when we originally adopted for this year. And then because the price of things are going up so high, the ADA bathrooms and the storm sewers, or not storm sewers, but the sewer lines for people are getting so expensive, we decided we would ask for an increase for next year. Our annual public services are just that. We annually give Livable Neighborhoods $20,000, and we annually fund $148,000 of Willagill, the multi-service center located down at 5th in Nebraska. The CDBG acquisition and rehab reconstruction, I hope this is the last year you see this. I believe both projects are closing out and will be done by the end of the year. They were for acquisition reconstruction of houses in the District 6 area and in the Northeast area. And I believe both houses are in the process of being finalized and being sold. And then the big initiative for us is the CDBG NRSA initiative. As you recall, we adopted a 5-year NRSA neighborhood revitalization strategy area, which is close to the city park area out to Central Avenue, to I-70, about 16th Street to 32nd Street. And the public infrastructure for City Park was year 2. The public infrastructure for Clifton Park is year 3, which is this year. And then the public infrastructure for park improvement, we anticipate putting some improvements at what they call City Park West, which is a little park there on the north side of 32nd and Park Drive. It has some parking needs, some playground equipment needs, that kind of thing. So the CDBG program total this year is for the revised is $3,154,000. Again, it does include reappropriations. And then next year, the allocation was $2,304,857. So if anybody has any questions about CDBG funding.
Questions, anyone?
Okay, I will go on to home. Again, home is also part of the block grant program and part of the annual action plan, and also has funds left over from the previous year that we bring forward. The CHIP program is our down payment assistance program. I need to let you know that it is currently suspended. HUD had asked us to review and update our underwriting strategy, and they have it at their office and are reviewing it now. So we will be getting this back online shortly. The new construction rehab are for agencies that are not considered TODOs, like Habitat. And so we've set aside $600,000 for those. The CHODOs are community housing development organizations. We have to set aside at least 15% of our budget. And as you know, we always set aside way more than that. And that is for agencies like CHWC, Community Housing of Wyandotte County, and Mount Carmel Redevelopment, who meet certain requirements that HUD requires to be considered the TODO or the Community Housing Development Organization. Both Habitat and the other agencies have had some funding out of this already. There are contracts on some of this funding in 2020 already. And then home administration is a portion of salaries that we can set aside for inspectors and other staff members who work on this program.
Questions on this segment? Anyone?
Okay, and finally, the third part of our draft annual plan is the Emergency Solutions Grant. The Emergency Solutions Grant is what we consider to be the homeless grant. We can put aside 7.5% for admin costs. The rest go to program activities. And that's for funding our homeless agencies. I believe we have 6 to 8 every year who go through an RFP process, submit requests for submit applications for funding. We have just went through the ranking and review process last week, and I expect to hear from the committee this week on their recommendation for the 2020 funds. And then again, next year we would do the same thing. We would put it out for requests for proposals and do the same thing. So those 3, Community Development Block Grant, Home Improvement Partnership, and Emergency Solutions Grant, constitute the draft annual plan. So if we determine that we need to make any changes after tonight, we can do so. Okay.
Questions or comments from this committee?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kane.
Miss Wilbur, we really appreciate the work that you do. You're the most consistent, I think, that we have all the time. We really appreciate your work.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that too. I would just like to run through the last 3 pages. There are other grants that we have going right now. So the first one would be our lead-based paint grant. we are in the third year of that grant. We are hoping that they allow us to extend it because, of course, everything came to a direct stop back early March. And we just reopened for application again June the 8th. We've got a question into, this is a different head office that we have to work with. We will hear back from them, I hope, shortly about whether or not we can extend on into next year. And this is just the balance of the funds that we have that they allocated us. The next one was the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, otherwise known as NSP. HUD came this year to, as you see, there's very little money. HUD came this year to monitor us and audit us on these programs. We are in the process of going through a closeout with them. So this would just go away, hopefully by the end of the year. And the final one is a big one. It is the CARES Act or COVID-19 funding that we've received from HUD. When I received this, when I put this budget in to the standing committee queue, I had not received an additional allocation of ESG CV funds. We did receive an additional $1.7 million for ESG CV. And so it adds up to about, these COVID funds actually add up to more than what we get for our regular annual, our budget. So these things, these budgets are just for COVID-related activities. They're to, as you saw on the report, the RFA, they are to prevent, prepare, and to respond to the coronavirus or COVID-19. The homeless funds can only be used for individuals and families who are homeless or receiving homeless assistance, and to support additional homeless assistance and homeless prevention activity to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. So we've got, like I said, 1.7 million that we need to add to this sheet, about I believe 3.7 million total.
So Willow, what is the sort of discussion of process for how to handle that 1.3 million plus the 600,000? Like what process are we going to go through to allocate those funds?
Well, one of the problems that we've had with the CDBG fund with HUD, you know, we started getting information about allocations probably at the very end of March, 1st of April. And they gave us, they being HUD, gave us a list of possible activities that we could spend these funds on. For instance, testing, or for instance, small business loan assistance. And everybody was going along, including my staff, trying to put something together. I worked with economic development, and then we were all sort of brought to a screeching stop because if agencies get money from FEMA, if agencies get money from the Payroll Protection Program, if they get any other federal funds from SBA or whatever, then we cannot fund them with our money. So what HUD has said and what FEMA has said, and now I understand all of the federal funds are saying, is they are putting out guidelines to prevent duplication of benefits. Or if you've heard Matt May talk about, or supplanting the city funds. So we have been going through webinars and conferences. I've been working with other cities around in this region. We're all trying to come up with a list of ideas of things that we could pay for that would not be duplication of benefits. We all went to a conference or overheard a conference last week where HUD is promising to get this information out to us as soon as possible. They're going through the federal register process, which to us always takes longer, but that's where we're at with the CDBG. On the ESG CV, that $683,000, we've already put out an RFP to all of our agencies to help us fill the gap for people who are needing help like rental assistance, utility assistance. If it was COVID related, if they lost their job and they're behind in arrears, then we can help with that. They went through the ranking and review process last week, again, along with the 2021. So we should know something this week about what the ranking and review committee proposed. As far as the 1.7 million, I am planning to have a meeting with all of our Wyandotte County homeless agencies and have a big discussion about what they think we can do to meet this. I know HUD is telling us that they're wanting us to eliminate homeless. I don't think that can be done with $1.7 million in Wyandotte County, but I want to get them all together so that we can get ideas. I believe that some of the agencies feel like there are people falling through the cracks. I know that some want us to help with mortgages, and so far we've gotten very little feedback from HUD about helping with mortgages. So that's where we are with the homeless fund.
Thank you, Wilba. And as the committee knows, here in a few minutes, we're going to get to hear more about the CARES Act, different type of CARES Act funding. But as you know, all this federal money comes with strings attached, so it's always a little complicated. Seems like it should be easy to spend money, but sometimes not so much. Are there other questions from this committee? Now, Wilba, I show this as for information only. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am. You will take action when we go through the budget process, and we will bring the draft annual action plan forward at the same meeting that you adopt the budget.
Great.
Commissioner Merkley, it's Melissa Bynum.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Wilba, on the last slide there with the COVID money.
Right.
The additional, well, I guess the ESG at 683,000 plus now 1.7 million additional that you've been awarded. Does that, when you talk about working with the homeless agencies, does that include places such as fellowship outreach, the singular actual homeless shelter here in Wyandotte County?
When I talk about the agencies that I was going to discuss them with were agencies that receive funding from us now. The main shelter that gets funding through us right now is the Friendly Gate shelter. Most of these agencies have already the things in place that need to be done, to carry out using federal funds. So, I mean, we don't go directly to new startups or new agencies generally because HUD rules are so cumbersome. And I mean, I could have a meeting with a lot of people and have way over $1.7 million of requests, but they want us to spend it on a fairly timely basis. So I was just anticipating going with our regular, I think there's 8 or 9, maybe 10 agencies that either are in the continuum of care or get funding from us now.
Okay, so I guess I should correct myself because yes, Friends of Yates is available as a shelter. But I think that when I reference fellowship outreach, I guess I mean the only one for men, but you're telling me that they don't currently operate within your current funded activities. Is that right?
As far as I know, unless they're funded through one of those agencies.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a comment or a question? If not, I will thank Wilba for her presentation tonight. And as Commissioner Kane said, for her consistency, she's one that always gets to visit our standing committee a couple times a year and always keeps us well informed. Thank you, Wilba, for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
All right, we will move on, team, to item number 4, which is a COVID Rapid Response Grant, and Health Department Director Julianne Van Loo is here to present that tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. I will share my screen briefly, but you should all have this in front of you. My screen share. Oh, there it is. That is not the screen that I want to share. Are people seeing this?
I'm not sure we're seeing what you want us to be seeing. We're seeing a screen, but that looks more like it.
All right. So this grant proposal is one that the health department made in coordination with 11 community partners to the Rapid Response Fund. And some of you may be familiar with that. That is the metro-wide response fund that has been put together by a large number of philanthropic foundations over previous months to help really just accumulate a large amount of funding to go out to folks all around the metro area. So we submitted our first request a couple of months ago and weren't in the couple rounds of funding. And then we heard back from them that they were very interested in our proposal, and we've worked with them to revise it since then. We have not received a formal letter of approval for this grant, but they have indicated that they intend to fund this grant for us. So I'm coming to you for approval this evening. This grant is for $750,000 specific to meeting COVID needs in our community. And we've heard from them that ours is the largest proposal that they are funding or have funded to date. And that what they liked so much about our proposal was that about 45% of it, $330,000, will flow through the health department and on to community organizations that I mentioned. So part of the funding will go directly to the health department for things like interpretation services, for contact tracing, for hiring additional contact tracing paid staff, for some communications work specific to COVID, for translation work for those materials, for a rapid response testing team that we will hire to deploy into workplaces and other areas in the community that are experiencing an outbreak of COVID, and then different supplies like laptops for our contracted personnel. So we're really excited. This is an opportunity for us to engage our partners who have worked with us in the Health Equity Task Force and in other ways around COVID, and send some money on to them to ensure that they can keep doing the great work they're doing related to COVID in the community, and really making sure our response is promoting health equity. So I will leave it at that unless people have questions or want me to talk about specific items within the grant. I'm happy to do so.
Julianne, is there any match for this grant?
No, there's no match.
Team, does anyone else have questions or comments? If not, this item is one that requires our approval.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Ramirez.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Philbrook,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye, thank you, Julianne, and thank you for all of your work. All right, our last item is our blue sheet item, is a presentation regarding CARES Act funding. As you may know, we were sort of waiting to get a full idea of what that funding was going to look like. And now Alan Howes is going to give a presentation to talk about what we know and the action steps we need to take. Alan, you ready to go?
Take myself off mute here. I'm ready to go. All right. You all see the screen there?
I'm not seeing it yet.
We'll give it 1 second here. Anything yet?
Nope.
Alan, if you're having issues, I can run it for you.
Okay. Thank you, Rocky. Sometimes technology bedevils us all.
I can see it now. Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you, Rocky. So as you heard from previous presentations, specifically Wilbur Miller's presentation, there is focus now on CARES Act funding, and specifically how that funding, in this case, flows to the state and then down to counties for use in the community. So we wanted to provide an update on the information as we know it to date, and also recognize that this is still a little bit of a work in progress in terms of guidance that is coming out of the state as well. And so we are reacting to that kind of in real time here. And joining me this evening for the presentation, Julianne Van Loo, Director of the Health Department, and also Kathleen Von Esch has been involved in the CARES Act funding as well. So Rocky, next slide. So the original legislation, federal legislation, provided just over $1 billion and a quarter to the state of Kansas for COVID-19 related funding. It provided direct funding to localities with over 500,000 population. So in Kansas, that was Johnson County and Sedgwick County received a direct allocation. All other counties received funding that is flowing through the state and from there down to counties. Pause for a second here. Rocky, are you? We're on slide 2. Oh, sorry. Go back one, Rocky. Somehow your screen switched over there. Okay. So Governor Kelly established the SPARK task force, which was charged with providing guidance for how the money will be allocated. And then it ultimately gets approved by the Senate Finance Committee. And there's also U.S. Department of Treasury guidance, and that limits the use of these payments for expenditures incurred, obviously, due to COVID-19, expenditures that were not accounted for in the budget, the most recently approved budget as of March 27th, when the legislation was enacted, and were incurred starting as of March 1st. And running through December 30th of this year. So it is time limited, and as noted in the earlier conversation, you can't use it to supplant existing budgeted expenses or capital construction, and you also can't use it to replace lost revenue as we're currently grappling with through the budget process. Next slide.
Alan, let me try to switch this. I noticed it's on a wrong screen, so give me just a second.
Thank you. That's also bigger. I appreciate that.
Next slide, please. So what are those things that can fall under this act and be available for funding? So certainly those expenses related directly to COVID activities, testing, contact tracing, personal protective equipment, those sort of expenses. It does make allowances for emergency needs. So whether that's housing, food insecurity, utilities, community health worker assistance. It allows for, likewise, economic disruption. So it recognizes the effect on the economy and on businesses. And so there's an opportunity there to provide funding through this for reducing COVID risk factors and recognizing that not all parts of the community have been impacted in the same way. And so addressing that. And then modifications and adaptation costs. So when this is, as it notes, remote working technology, sort of physical barriers, a lot of those things that you're seeing pop up in the UG for making those modifications and adaptations. Next slide, please. So what does Wyandotte County get more specifically? So as noted, the state created the Sparks Task Force. They created an allocation formula for localities that is then approved by the Finance Committee. It's based upon population plus the amount of impact community has gotten from COVID. So for Wyandotte County, the allocation is based on $226 per resident, and based on our current population, that comes to just over $32 million, and then an additional 5.2 from the impact fund, and that's because of the impact that COVID has had in terms of cases and in terms of job loss. So the total expected to be received through the CARES Act is $37.3 million. So the funding is provided
Alan?
by the county. Yes.
Commissioner Mike Kane.
Yes, Commissioner.
That's the first wave of money. There's supposed to be 3.
Yes, that's a good point, which is the state didn't allocate all of the dollars all at once. And so this is the, as Commissioner Kane notes, the first wave. And Commissioner, you may have additional insight in terms of what the additional waves would consist of and when. We haven't received that guidance yet.
When they are working on it, I know 2 people that sit on the committee, and as soon as I get as much information, I will share it with everyone.
Right. Thank you. So this CARES Act funding goes to the county. So the county retains the fiduciary and reporting responsibilities for that $37 million. Other units of government are eligible for this funding. So that includes Bonner Springs and Edwardsville as cities within Wyandotte County. So their COVID-related expenses and other things, as noted above, would be eligible through this funding. And also noting that there are separate allocations for K through 12, for higher education, and for healthcare providers that have been allocated as well. Next slide. So the UG COVID expenses to date, this was through May. The total was $1.8 million. Also working through, and Matt May, our emergency manager, is looking at this as well, which is there may be an opportunity for some or all of this 1.8 to be submitted through FEMA and the Stafford Act as a kind of a natural disaster type of event, in which case the reimbursement rate would be 75% and the CARES Act funding would be the remaining 25. Alternatively, if that doesn't become an avenue that is available, and again, this is one of those kind of areas where we're still awaiting clear guidance from the federal government, the alternative would be, the entirety of that 1.8 would be reimbursed through the CARES Act funds. And so turn to the funding allocation process, and also maybe ask Commissioner Markley if she wants to speak to this as well in terms of
Sure.
the process
So,
for applications. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So Commissioner Philbrook had expressed early interest in this committee even before it was sent to our standing committee. The mayor asked me to chair a subcommittee. While we certainly can continue to have this entire process governed by our entire standing committee, my sense was that it might be easier to have a smaller group, because anytime you're going over applications and trying to read all of that material and get everybody's schedules aligned, it's just difficult the more people you have in that group, the more, I think, complex it can become. So certainly I'm willing to chair whatever group comes together. Jane Philbrook has agreed to sit within that group. I was thinking maybe a group of 3 would be nice. While I think Jane and I could be a 2-man army, if that is the will of the standing committee, I was hoping maybe we would have a 3rd member volunteer to be a part of a subcommittee of this standing committee to go over those applications and work with this staff support group on the funding allocation process. Or, like I said, Jane and I are fine. Nobody wants to do that.
Commissioner Markley, this is Commissioner Bynum. I would agree to serve if you wanted another set of eyes on the review process. I'd be happy to do it.
All right. If no one objects, I think that we will move forward with those 3 standing committee members serving as a subcommittee of this standing committee. And I think the concept, and Alan, you might cover this in a future slide, is that this smaller committee would go through the applications and make recommendation to likely the full commission, but depending on timing, it might come back to the standing committee separately. All right, Alan, unless someone objects, I would say move ahead if you have more slides for us.
All right. Next slide, I will turn it over to Julianne Van Loo, Director of the Health Department, to talk about the process a little bit.
Good evening again. This is Julianne Van Loo. I think I'm perhaps one of the most eager to see this move very quickly to get some additional funding into the health department. So I'm excited that we're going to try to move as quickly as we can. In this first phase, you can see in June, we are hoping to launch an application. Our goal is next Monday, June 29th, to have an application go live on our website for community partners and other municipalities and the folks Alan mentioned that are eligible for this funding. Then we would allow that application to be open for 2 weeks. So that would close, we're hoping July 13th, in which case that subcommittee that Commissioner Markley spoke of would meet to review all of the applications. Then we do have to submit the plan. So of the applications we select, we have to submit those kind of combined as our Wyandotte County plan to the state for approval before we can disperse that funding and make final decisions. So that is will happen, we hope, in August at some point. Next slide, please. Most of that is just reiterated. Again, we're hoping to close those on July 13th and review them within a couple weeks to get that submitted to the state by August 1 or near there. And you can see there the kind of folks that are eligible for this application process. Next slide. Alan, I'll swing that back to you.
All right. So as Commissioner Markley noted, getting a subgroup together. So that will happen soonest. And part of that work will be developing decision criteria for the review process for applications that are submitted. Note, we'll also finalize and launch the application next week, and then want to make sure we're communicating with the other units of government and potential applicants to let people know that this is coming and available, and so people have access and an opportunity to apply through this process. So this is the last slide, open for questions or discussions, just kind of reiterating the 37.3 million and kind of the main buckets of activity that were identified through the CARES Act for use.
Commissioner Mike Kane, I've been told that there's possible monies in there for public safety. So I would hope the committee would take a really deep look at that. And I will look from the outside with the folks I know to see what we can do to get some of those expenses covered. But there is something there. I don't know exactly what it is. I haven't seen it yet. But when you get the full package, it's something that you might want to do a deep dive on. And then call me so I can verify that with the people that work on the committee.
Thanks, Commissioner. Anyone else?
I
will say, go ahead, Commissioner Bynum.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to try to say it back to you and the committee and the staff and the public, because I personally have found it all quite confusing. And just for this clarification, COVID-19 has punched a $23 million hole in our unified government operating budget. And at the same time, simultaneously, we are going to receive into our coffers 37.5 million, and it is not to repair the $23 million budget hole. Primarily, it might be here and there. And as Alan Howes had indicated, to date, we've identified internally 1.8 million that we can attribute in direct costs associated with our dealing and mitigating of COVID-19 in this community. So I do appreciate Commissioner Kane's comment about looking further and making sure that if there are, for example, public safety uses that are legitimate for this money, that we do not let that get beyond us. But other than that, these dollars are going to go, I think it was one slide before this one. These dollars are going to go out into our community to 501c3 nonprofits, private businesses, possible other units of government, and then again within our own departments to mitigate the costs that we can say are a direct result of COVID-19. Now, I'm asking all of that in the form of a question, and the question is that right? Is what I just said as a recap correct?
I would say, though, I think mostly, I think it can be for recovery efforts, I believe, from COVID-19 as well. So, I mean, the loans we're making to businesses and things like that may not necessarily be covering their direct costs of what they bought or what products they needed, but maybe for the recovery effort. So it all has to relate back to COVID-19 from what I have read so far, but it might be a little broader than simply, you know, having to reimburse costs that are related to COVID-19. If that
Commissioner Bynum, I think that you're pretty close to accurate. I think something else that the public need, go to the next slide, please. Where's the one that says how much money we get?
Next one.
The last slide, maybe? Or yeah, there were two of them that had that information.
I don't see it yet.
Oh, cool. There it is.
Okay, so the 37 million. What we have to remember is whatever we don't come up with to say this was part of the COVID thing goes back, and this has to be done in a timely manner. So one, this isn't going to be easy. Staff is going to be jumping through hoops, trying to figure out as much as they can. And I think the community needs to know that if we can prove that it was a COVID deal, then it'll be paid for. And if we can't, the money goes back to other areas that need the money as well. So there's a two-edged sword here. Yes, that's a lot of money. We have to share it with the other municipalities and the schools and the 503Cs and the rest of them. It's not as big as I would hope it would be. I think the next wave should be about the same or maybe even bigger, but you know, we will all be working to make sure this money gets spent where it's supposed to be spent. And I think we as commissioners, along with staff, need to help identify some of these areas.
Thank you, Commissioner. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it looks like such a huge amount of money. And again, people always think it's easy to spend money, but in this case, it's going to be a Herculean effort to, in a relatively short timeline, allocate all of these funds in a way that doesn't violate any of the guidelines that we've been given, but without leaving a single dollar on the table. So that's the goal that we will set out with, is to spend this money in the best way for our community. And in short order, because our timeline is pretty tight. Are there other questions from this committee? This item is for information only, but if there are any concerns about the process, now would be the time to voice them because of that quick timeline. This may be the last time you have that chance, so speak now or hold your peace. All right, Alan, anything else from you or Julianne from you? Okay, that was our blue sheet item and our final item for this evening. So if there are no other questions or comments, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for your attendance and attention tonight. Thanks so much.